001, the other shoe. The night sky sparked brilliantly for a second, like a defective emergency flare, as the back wheel of Gnome's pickup came to settle in the oily, water-filled pothole of an emergency parking space out front of, heavens to bestie, a family laundromat with a splash. We're not getting out of this, he thought, when a fresh, miles-long spark of a white-purple lightning bolt broke across the big western sky, zap crawling as it streaked with jumpy electric precision, reminding him of a science museum exhibition display. Grabbing a baggie containing its single, tattered kid's shoe off the passenger seat, Gnome shoved the bundle into the inner lining of his raincoat and rested his palms on the worn plastic steering wheel cover, waiting for the thunderclap, which would never come. That was the thing about heavy light now, wasn't it? He noted, with a sinking feeling deep in his chest. This wasn't the old nature anymore. Breathing deeply, Gnome forced himself to snuff out the persistence of that dreaded outcome, and rather ground himself in the aspects of life he could control. At the moment, like reuniting lost belongings with their alleged rightful owners. The lightning bolt sizzled, nagging his conscience. A short circuit in the wiring of time-space. A living, hypernatural jolt. The scratchy truck radio mumbled. Even the nightly news update was making note of it. And here we've got it again, going into the weekend. That thunderless time-lapse lightning again. Impossible to ignore, downright peculiar. And what's to follow? Gnome closed his eyes. Tightening his jaw, he shut off the motor, killing the audio. But he knew what the journalist's follow-up would go on to say, especially the fallout that trails it every time. Gnome's eyes watched through the windshield in real time as the drops of rain spray slowed to hover, still in the air, suspended. It had been absurd to hope no one would notice the phenomenon. Silent, white-purple lightning, and the slow lag rain that even stopped, froze. And that, sweet and cute and hypnotic as it was, racked up for now as another of nature's mysteries, was the least of their problems. His battered brain was tickled back into the moment with the snap flash of a brutally bright, blinking neon storefront sign, which engulfed his field of vision, filling in the void left over with a new, friendlier round of retinal fatigue. The letters blinked, sparking off the droplets of the evening's dark wetness, hissing where windswept spray seeped water deep into its inner wiring, causing the standard greeting to flicker unassuringly. "Hello, neighbor." All one word, as if it spoke to him directly. That statement conveyed a certain specific truth. The scrappy Scando-Nordic family who owned and operated the laundromat were, in a loose interpretation of the definition, his backyard neighbors. If, and only if, one took into account the half-kilometer of steep, dank, old-growth forest and that hidden tennis court between his house way atop the hillside and their crumbling waterfront home above the wash salon. Those factors, and the property lines which had been eaten alive by nature's appetite decades ago, then yes, they were neighbors. He did feel welcome in a roundabout kind of way, but actually he bundled that feeling with the certain illusion, the laundromat being a business, and everyone was, of course, welcome in that customer service sort of way. Nevertheless, their interactions were special, few and far between, and Gnome attempted to mentally prepare himself for every visit. Generally, he just wasn't accustomed to dealing with kids, and especially not the 2 or 3 generation gaps between them, not to mention the nagging chasm of economic inequity, which always instigated attention, a gulp coming up through his throat, making him salivate and swallow his discomfort. The kids, on the other hand, simply didn't care at this stage of life. They were too young and resilient. They'd slept in cars, for Pete's sake. But for Noam, he thought it all triggered a tightness in his chest as he looked up at their home, the time-worn flophouse apartment plopped atop the storefront property, whipped up out of architectural surplus afterthoughts. Even when it was new, he thought, even when this building had been thrown up 50 years ago, it all seemed so slapped together that to begin with, it looked like a cheap prop motel made of building leftovers which could barely withstand the region's incessant rains. Nevertheless, this was a vital local business. As many of the swampy waterfront's local residents had either no washing machines or, what they did have sat rusting on the lawn, being consumed by weeds, Heavens to Bestie was a staple, a place where one could trade a few hours and a roll of quarters for a week's worth of clean clothes. And Noam didn't come by often, but every time he did, he wished he could do more than, for example, just return a supposedly lost shoe. Maybe tonight was maybe a step in that direction. After an endless work push of pure development deadline stress, here he was, on a Thursday night, actually looking forward to this interaction above all. Even if the elements were moody and slightly sadistic tonight, it was somehow some kind of a treat. Pulling his hood up over his wiry, white-haired head to rest on the rims of his thick glasses, reliably preventing it from slipping down any further into his field of vision, Noam opened the truck door to confirm the reality that he was officially out of his comfy, cozy element, and, if anything, that was an important challenge, and the right thing to do, and it was said to be good to be out of one's comfort zone, and stay human, and hungry, and in the distance, a stereotypical robot voice chimed in, repeating, "Caution, vehicle approaching," over and over again, which echoed from the tunnel of the steep loading dock of the bleak, scary Soviet-era-looking concrete bunker, which served as some sort of business next door. Looking back around over his shoulder, there was no activity on the street or the parking lot, just rain, street lights, and darkness. He remembered that recording of the robot lying from before. It never stopped. It was always pumping a phantom threat into the air, but for those few moments after his arrival, it felt somewhat welcoming, as if he were being announced from some unseen location in the air. But after a few visits, he came to realize that it was simply short-circuited and announcing nothing to no one, nothing but the night.